crisis and redemption hold hands. Whenever we hit the crisis, there is there and then an opportunity for rise, expansion. Before that, as I have mentioned, it's either licking of the wounds, it's adding into the conglomerate of what we have assembled here, so that like I can assemble even more. But the real and extraordinary awaits the one who is amidst of that crisis. And when I said that artists at heart know that and often facilitate that, they know that there is this correlation between crisis and creativity. And I'm not talking about crisis as a state of psychosis, which is completely opposite of it. So you've heard that there was this emphasis, vocal emphasis on the spontaneous nature of this work. The emphasis is being made on the uniqueness of this work is in creating enough impulse so that internalization of pranic currents begin, which requires total realignment of all our creative resources. Everything that we're resourced with are creative resources. We may call this and that, maybe creativity is like for someone else, I'm minding my own business, I studied precise disciplines, or I didn't study anything, school wasn't for me. No, there's only creative impulses. You have to just realize and understand this. There are only creative impulses. We can even specify this and pay respect to the teacher. The impulses of creative intelligence at work. So realignment of these impulses of creative intelligence is taking place. And it is a prerequisite, it's a necessity. There's another term for that, very strong, unapologetic Sanskrit term, tapas. But for the Westerner, the word tapas is too exotic and often translated one-sidedly, right? That spiritual ardor, because that's what it is. It's a spiritual ardor, tapas. If you look into the spiritual literature, and we are happy to recommend some of it, what you would really be discovering is that this tapas is fundamentally important aspect as far as the whole entire Indian subcontinent is concerned. And if we say Indian subcontinent, that means the entire Orient, the entire Eastern culture. Everything is colored by that what was born, developed, thrived in India and spilled over. Japanese scholars, Chinese scholars all agree on that. This is how the spiritual knowledge got disseminated. And tapas, along with yagya, holds special place in Indian spirituality. So tapas is that ardor. And without that ardor, accordingly, spiritual work is simply impossible. Impossible. It would be just like dabbing here or there, hoping that there will be some kind of outcome. So development of tapas, build-up of the tapas, is considered to be an important ingredient which will give the power to any transformative processes. But I'm suggesting here to give it also an additional, let's say, gloss over, and applying this term realignment of creative resources. This realignment of creative resources can happen, and usually in our day and age happen, when life, kick us in a butt. Because as long as life doesn't give us kicks, we are all lucky-go-happy, or happy-go-lucky, whichever you want to put it. Really, spirituality can be cherry on a cake, icing on a cake, or I can do without a dessert. No cakes for me, please, today. It's like that. It's an addition to our life. And spirituality has been treated in our day and age, in Western culture, as an additional, that cherry. You see? Yes, there is a very vast area of therapeutic application, because a lot of people finding that they are miserable. And just as the opposite of that, one needs to find a way to be happy for no reason. People realizing that they're miserable for no reason. Because there's no reason why they are miserable. This is what we're talking about. You see? And then, of course, this whole thing gains its own momentum. We'll leave that aside. So yes, there is massive interest in spiritual work, primarily in the industry of self-development, because when we feel we're undeveloped and we need to develop ourselves, this is where we want to dab into the secret and special transformative techniques, so we can utilize these techniques to advance in life. Nothing wrong with that. I'm not being sarcastic, just being a little bit more explicit before I see all of you lying down and falling asleep again. Then there is, of course, this trauma, healing, licking the wounds, I call it, just personal language. And for the majority, for the rest of the majority, this cherry on the cake. Life is already good, so I can add that. You see? Life is already good, well, let me just then see how I can stick my tongue into the cavities so that I can milk the heavenly cow, so that the Kikari mudra is in place, on top of my Jaguar, on top of my Aston Martin, my houses and everything. So it's like I'm a fully developed Renaissance man. See? This is not realignment of creative resources. So this is why, in a way, when life decides to give that kick, it can be very, very welcoming affair. Because with that kick, there is this suddenly propensity and also, hopefully, humility as well. And that propensity causes this realignment. Everyone who gotten in touch with the artist within knows very well that creative process can never be taken for granted. Never. You can't take creative process for granted. It's like constantly walking that balancing line, a rope that connects two cliffs. You can't just walk on it as if you're walking and you're chewing gum and walking on your phone in an alleyway somewhere. No, it's a tight rope walk. Because one wrong movement, one this, one that, may God save you. So this realignment of creative resources is very important part, because that's what brings this to often reevaluation of everything, because that's what it is. It's inseparable from. And the propensity then to really rediscover and reconnect to the source of it all, both the source of misery and the source of happiness, is where we are placing our emphasis. So this whole, in a way, spiritual business can be viewed from the perspectives that what is here in the first place becomes that driving force, that impulse. Hence, I wanted to bring that to our attention, is whenever we are amidst of some form of realignment, this is when the most amazing, extraordinary transformation is at hand. This is when extraordinary things can happen. So in other words, crisis and redemption are two sides of the same medal. Crisis and redemption hold hands. Whenever we hit the crisis, there is there and then an opportunity for rise, expansion. Before that, as I have mentioned, it's either licking of the wounds, it's adding into the conglomerate of what we have assembled here, so that like I can assemble even more. But the real and extraordinary awaits the one who is amidst of that crisis. And when I said that artists at heart know that and often facilitate that, they know that there is this correlation between crisis and creativity. And I'm not talking about crisis as a state of psychosis, which is completely opposite of it. We live at the moment as a society at large in a state of major psychosis. Our next online first free live broadcast, followed by online darshan, will be precisely dedicated to this theme, to this collective psychosis. Please look it up. Welcome to join us. And this is a big topic in its own right. And I'm not talking about this psychosis. You see? Crisis is a realignment. Acting out of psychosis, acting out of the pattern that is created, that only when one is in a state of some kind of psychotic responses, reactions, one is prompted to act. If you look at it in the world today, this is what our world has become. I'm talking about now the grand perspective, big picture, as somehow inadvertently turned out to be that Happy Easter darshan. Impromptu, it wasn't planned. I thought I will miss it. I will just, let's do Q&A, safe and handy. Let's just go there. The bigger picture, look at how everything functions. Everything functions at the level of first we let ourselves to the state of complete and utter psychosis, and then trying to resolve it internationally. Like right now, it's like we're pushing it like, oh, I'm curious to see how far to the edge of the abyss with the nuclear Armageddon we can push ourselves. Who's going to be first? Putin? Biden? Come on, guy. Come on. Who's first? You first. Yeah. You know? So already there's this guys, this discussing, this like these bloggers, this vloggers, this what have you, discussing. You know, the videos are thrown into my feed all the time because I happen to look at this Lex Hicksman or this guy, Joe Rogan, or this. It's like discussing that. It's okay. So what will happen in the first 20 minutes of nuclear exchange? I'm supposed to listen and imagine what's going to happen in the first 20 minutes of nuclear exchange between the superpowers. What's going to happen in the next year after nuclear exchange? Nuclear winter, apparently. And of course, all this is accompanied by, artistically created thumbnails. You know, this guy, whoever, I don't know, he may be already AI, artificial intelligence, because we were supposed to all be vaporized by then, walking around still in the full, suit there, so as not to get radioactive. But if he's artificial intelligence, what's the big deal? Amidst like a completely like deserted landscape. This is may seem at superficial surface level as funny, but it's not funny at all. It's not funny. So realignment of creative resources is very important because this is where there can be quantum leap shift. And this is where the true awakening can take place. So excuse me, folks, forgive me to burst the bubble, not necessarily for the audience, so don't take any of you personally, but because this is on a camera, it's meant to be said, so as to then, if when it's shared, it has the message that supersedes us as a group gathered here, or exceeds, rather, I meant. Majority of people who wake up out of the blue for no reason, these are not real awakenings. They are not real awakenings. You know, people think that they are awakened, and this constant inquiries, and the stories are given. In the majority of cases, I'm saying, these are not real awakenings. Real awakening is a result of that realignment in the first place, because it happens at the level of consciousness. Psychotic episode cannot make one awaken. It can bust the system and things just start going haywires. Did you see how the system get busted? Why is it called awakening? So before we go into meditation, I thought to give this little kind of hints that learn to ride the hurricane. Learn to ride, like Lao Tzu put it. So this crisis and redemption that many of us are being pushed into, and particularly now, maybe worth mentioning, maybe not, as we are heading for this very historical solar eclipse on April 8th, which purportedly is here to really shake us all up, potentially collectively, or at least how some astrologers from various different traditions emphasize and have been emphasizing. So this crisis where we find ourselves right now, yet again, in translation to our own individually lived dilemmas, is an opportunity in disguise. So one of the, if I were to say it in terms of the encouragement, it's like if ever you lacked incentive and somehow for giving yourself to yourself, in a sense that's what the art of meditation and the art of transformation is. There will never be better time. Because in times when, let's say, Buddha walked the earth, we could speculate this was a luxury. It was a luxury. Nobody was doing this like, hey, who's going to first blow up the whole thing? Who's going to be the first? None of that was there. Maybe in a seed form, sensed already somehow that the paradise is being lost, but still far from any acuity of the situation. So, in other words, if you lack that encouragement, it is now more than ever that it is important that there are meditations, not praying for Armageddon, right? Getting together and praying in the name of some kind of Godhead for the second coming of Christ, so as to restore justice and bring the last judgment upon us. No. So in other words, spiritual work today is a necessity of time. It's a necessity. Because vestiges of that what held that balance have been destroyed, and the emphasis is made on religions. And you can see what religions do when they are institutionalized, politicized, and weaponized, and give blessings for genocides. Just like doesn't matter where the church is giving the blessings to the genocide. Doesn't matter where the house itself placed. Whether it's jihadists, or whether these are the Jesuits, or whether these are the evangelists in the United States, or historically speaking, when the Vatican blessed the Nazis, as we know it, to go into this. That's what it is. Whenever the religion cahooting with political powers, that's, yes, truly, truly lamentable affair. So this major exchange, major influx of spiritual ideas that took place more emphatically in the last 60 to 50 years is perhaps the necessity of time. Necessity of time. So meditation here is that. And there I link this to what we spoke earlier, what I spoke earlier, as each heart at a time. Each heart at a time. So if that peace is found in your heart, true sense of that equanimity, the power of that peace has a resonance that is amplified way beyond your geographical location. But when we sit together like this, the amplification goes many times that in fact is already measurable. So let this be an encouragement, and I suggest we now shift towards the actual seating.